and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Think about Loa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Today I'll be giving my 2025 college football playoff semifinals predictions. So starting with Indiana versus Oregon. So offensively, I think Indiana is better than Oregon. And at quarterback, while it is close, I trust Fernando Mendoza a little more than I do Dante Moore. Because even though Moore has 108 more passing yards and a little bit better completion percentage than Mendoza does, Mendoza is averaging nearly a full yard more per throw than Moore is, and Mendoza has 7 more touchdown passes than Moore does, and 3 less interceptions.
Showing pressure. Here it comes. Mendoza has time. Lows end zone. Caught!
And while Mendoza doesn't run a lot, when he has run, he has been effective, and he is a better runner than Moore is. But for Oregon to win this game, their offensive line must play better than it did in the first meeting against Indiana. And Oregon's offensive line has not proven that they can handle elite defensive lines. Texas Tech, while they did do better against them in pass protection than against Indiana, they only gave up 2 sacks. They were even worse in run blocking. And Oregon's defensive line needs to play like it did against Texas Tech for them to win. Also, because Indiana has a better offensive line than Texas Tech does, and they've got a better offensive line than Oregon does. Pat Coogan, the center that they brought in from Notre Dame, has been a huge hit for them. He's become one of college football's best centers. He hasn't allowed a sack all season and has only allowed 8 total pressures. And at wide receiver, while it is close, and Oregon's wide receiver room, I think, is as deep as Indiana's is, I have to give Indiana the advantage because Oregon doesn't quite have a wide receiver as good as Indiana's Elijah Surratt or Omar Cooper. And against Texas Tech, DeCorian Moore still didn't do much. Only 3 catches for 21 yards. And it does feel like for Oregon to win this game, their best wide receiver is going to have to make some big plays. But Oregon does have a big tight end advantage because they have Kenyon Sadiq. But at running back, while it is close, Indiana, I would have to give the advantage to. Their starting running back, Roman Henby, is the best in this game, I think. And him and his backup, Kalen Black, running back that Signetti brought over with him from James Madison, have been one of the best running back combinations this season. They've combined for 1,905 yards and 15 touchdowns. Now, defensively, Oregon, I think, can match up with Indiana in the secondary. And Oregon's secondary, I think, can slow down Indiana's passing attack a little. But Mendoza, I still think, will throw for a little over 200 yards in this game. And Dante Moore in the first meeting with Indiana was held under 200 yards passing, and I think Indiana's going to hold them under 200 yards passing again. But Oregon freshman cornerback Brandon Finney, I think, was the most impressive player in that Oregon Texas Tech game. He had 6 tackles, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. and he already looks almost as good as Indiana's D'Angelo Pons is. You can tell that Brandon Finney is probably going to be a first round pick someday. But Indiana safety Lewis Moore, even though he wasn't an All-American, I think he's every bit as good as Oregon's All-American safety Dylan Thieneman. But Indiana is better in the front seven than Oregon is. And I think this Oregon offensive line is going to get dominated. I think they're going to be held under 100 yards rushing. And I think this Indiana pass rush that's elite is going to hurt them again. I think Indiana gets 5 sacks at least in this game. And Oregon, I think, will do better at stopping the run than they did in the first meeting with Indiana, but I still think Indiana is able to run for about 125 yards in this game. But Indiana will have to throw the football more than they did against Alabama. But I think this Indiana offensive line is able to limit Oregon to just a few sacks. Indiana has a stronger pass rush than Oregon does. Now, Oregon defensive linemen, Bear Alexander and Amari Washington, those two are as good a run stoppers as you're going to find. And their linebacker, Bryce Botcher, he's about as good of a tackler as you're going to find. None of them have been much help in the pass rush this season. Now, Oregon's two really good pass rushers, Mateo Uyunglele and Tatum Tuatoa, are both coming off big games. Against Texas Tech, Uyunglele had 2 tackles, a sack, and a fumble recovery, and Tuatoa had 6 tackles and 2 sacks. Tuatoa is their top player in sacks with 9.5, while Uyunglele leads the team in quarterback pressures with 41. But while Indiana is missing one of their great pass rushers, Stephen Daly, they still have 4 great pass rushers, Elijah Hardy, Isaiah Jones, Tyreek Tucker, and Mikael Kamara. And all of those players except for Kamara have at least 5 sacks. And Kamara makes up for his low sack numbers because he has 58 total quarterback pressures. And with coaching in this one, while it is close, and I do trust Signetti and his coaching staff a little more than Lanning and his coaching staff. And Indiana, I also think, is the better team overall defensively, too. I think this one will be competitive and close for most of the game, but I think Indiana scores a touchdown late to pull away. I've got Indiana getting the win over Oregon by a score of 27-13. So now Ole Miss versus Miami. So with coaching in this game, even though Miami head coach Mario Cristobal has a lot more experience than Pete Golding does, I actually think Ole Miss is even better without Lane Kiffin. Now, I'm not saying Lane Kiffin made them worse. It's because I think that this Ole Miss team is even more motivated because they lost him. And Ole Miss, they have a much better offense than Miami it does. And Ole Miss has a big quarterback advantage. Trinidad Chambliss is a better passer and a much better runner than Carson Beck is.
From their own 24. Trinidad Chambliss running out of time. Didn't see it coming. He got it off. Keywan Lacey takes the shovel.
Trinidad Chambliss in 2 less games has a 347 more yards passing and 464 more yards rushing than Carson Beck does. Now, Beck has been more accurate than Chambliss has, but Chambliss averages zero point 0.7 yards more per throw than Beck does, and has thrown 7 less interceptions than Beck has. Beck, though, did make more plays with his legs against Ohio State than he ever has before. But for Ole Miss to win this game, they're going to have to do what they did against Georgia, which is air it out because Miami does have a better overall defense than Ole Miss does. Their elite part of their defense is their defensive line. Their defensive line is a lot better than Ole Miss's is because they have Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor. But while Miami's secondary is good, they did give up 287 yards passing to Julian Sayin. And this Miami defensive line, I do think, will slow down the Ole Miss running game. Well, I do still think Ole Miss will get over 100 yards rushing, and Colin Lacey will get a few good runs of 10 or more yards, though. Trinidad Chambliss didn't try to run much against Georgia, only 4 runs for 14 yards. I don't think he'll run much in this game either. But Ole Miss, I think, will try to shut down Malachi Tony. And even though Miami has been winning without Tony being involved much in the pass catching, Ole Miss has a better offense than both Texas A&M and Ohio State do. So for Miami to beat them, it seems like Malachi Tony is going to have to make a couple of big plays. Ole Miss does have the better overall wide receiver room than Miami does, even though they don't have a receiver quite as good as Malachi Tony. Ole Miss has a deeper wide receiver room than Miami has got. Their wide receivers, Trey Wallace and Dazon Stripling, were amazing in that Georgia game. They combined for 16 catches for 278 and averaged 17.3 yards per catch. They're better than those other Miami wide receivers besides Tony and Ole Miss because they have Daquan Wright. They do have a big tight end advantage. Miami's offensive line, I do think, will play well in this game. I don't think Ole Miss will be able to get much pressure on them. And Mark Fletcher, I do think, will play well again. I think he'll run for over 100 yards and get a few explosive runs. And I think Miami, as a team, will run for over 150 yards in this game. But Miami has been struggling to score points when Malachi Tony has not been involved. And in the regular season, Kywan Lacey was a better running back than Mark Fletcher. But in the college football playoff, Fletcher has been as good of a running back as Kywan Lacey has been. But Ole Miss, their offensive line is really good too. And well, they haven't faced a pass rushers as good as Miami's Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor. Oklahoma, who they played, had several good pass rushers, and they handled them. I think Ole Miss will be able to limit Miami to only a few sacks in this game. And at linebacker, I think Ole Miss can match up with Miami. Their TJ Daugherty and Centurion Perkins is one of the better linebacker combinations in college football. They've combined for 161 tackles this season. And Ole Miss, their secondary is actually a little bit better than Miami's. They're averaging giving up 7 less yards passing per game than Miami is. And I think Ole Miss will be able to hold Carson Beck to around 200 yards passing in this one. And well, I do think this Miami defense can slow down the Ole Miss offense. I don't think they can come near shutting them down. I think Trinidad Chambliss and these wide receivers are going to give them problems. Well, I don't think they'll do as well as they did against Georgia. I still think Chambliss will throw for 250 plus yards in this game. They have too many weapons at wide receiver to be shut down. And Ole Miss, you can tell that after that Georgia game, their defense is much improved. Than it was earlier in the season. And Miami, their offense, I don't think is quite as good as Georgia's is. I think this is going to be a close game, but I do think Ole Miss gets the win in a game that comes down to the end, most likely. I've got Ole Miss 27, Miami 24. So that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.